Hello guys. No. Hello. My name is Brittany. Welcome to my channel. My name is Brittany. I already said that. Okay. Hello. Welcome to my channel. My name is Brittany and I talk about a plethora of books. Today I'm going to be talking to you guys specifically about the book The Handmaid's Tale. I've kind of had like a micro hyperfixation over the book and the series. The latest TV show, I think it was season 6 of the TV show, just came out, which kind of like motivated me to want to watch the whole series over again, as well as actually read the book. Previously I read the book via audio book, but this is my first time actually like reading it in like actual book format, which was much more intriguing, and I think I liked it. I preferred it better by actually just like the traditional way of reading. And before we start, I kind of want to give a little bit of a trigger warning with the content of this book. We are talking about assault that to a certain extent. We will be talking about kind of political viewpoints a little bit in this book because this book has caused so much angst in a lot of groups in a lot of states. And then we're also just talking about like a dystopian society where there is kind of nuances of power dynamics and a disenfranchisement of people. So just as a heads up, I would definitely look at spoilers because I am going to talk about some things that may be triggering, so you can definitely skip ahead in this book. You can definitely skip ahead in this video if you want to, but the main point of this video is I want to talk about the book being banned. So The Handmaid's Tale is made or was written by Margaret Atwood in 1985. This book, since it has been published, has been controversial to a certain extent, and I just want to talk about like why it was banned and everything. But in order for me to give you a cohesive idea of why that is, I kind of need to tell you what's going on in the plot. I've already kind of have an installment in series of talking about banned books. The last book I talked about last month was The Giver. I'll have it in a playlist as well as that video linked above and below. That book has a little bit more details in terms of like why books are banned, the nuances, other people's opinions on whether books should or should not be banned, and more of like the nuances generally speaking when we're talking about challenged or banned books. Let's get into this book. I want to start with the plot summary of this book, and Margaret Atwood did such a great job kind of formulating this book where we're learning about 3 segments of time, but they're woven in together and they're intermingled within the story that we're reading. And so for the sake of my mental stability, I'm going to not try to tell you all 3 parts at once. I'm going to separate it into 3 parts. I'm going to be titling it, we have before, during, and after. So before is going to be based off of like the United States as we kind of know it today in terms of having a Congress and a military and a constitution. During is going to be specifically talking about the main character and her training to become a handmaid. And then the last is like afterward, which is her in her position in a newly found country named of Gilead that have been started by this group called the Sons of Jacob. And we're going to learn about, I'm going to speak about that. The main character, her name is Alfred or June, depending on what segment of time we're speaking about. To start off with before. So before, in the segments or that we get in this book of talking about the time before, it is the United States as we know it. And most importantly, in this segment of the book, we are being introduced to these characters that are one, the main character June, her community, as well as the people in her life that kind of make her the way that she is. And so we're like learning these characters and we're learning her inward motivations towards things, and that really helps. So one of the characters that we mentioned is Luke. Luke is her husband. She also has a child that we mentioned, and we know that the child has been taken. We also meet her mother. Her mother is this like feminist icon who just kind of like guns blazing. So her mother is very much in tune to the liberation and the upward advancement of women specifically. And June has been cultivated in an environment of that, where she would go to these magazine burning sessions with her mom to like see all of these magazines that the group that her mother was a part of like being burned because they go against this feminist rhetoric. And so that is kind of like the cocoon in terms of June's adolescence that she grew up in. In this book, one of the other main characters that we learn about is Moira. Moira is a lesbian. However, in the country of Gilead, she would be considered a gender traitor, which would be persecuted by like the consequences of that would be death. However, in this book, she's this very formidable, like very strong character, which I think also plays a part when I talk about specifically this book being banned. And we're learning about these characters, and then we find out that in the before, there was this time where the US Army just was like null and void, and Congress was no more, and the Constitution was revoked. And all these people in this time are feeling as though, oh, this is just a temporary thing, a temporary segment of their life. This is not going to be forever. However, it is. It's permanent. One of the also issues that this group, the Sons of Jacob, have been able to have like this insurgence of power in this country is the factor that there has been a shortage of children being born. So the fertility rate and the population is rapidly decreasing because not enough children are being born every single year, which is causing issues not only in this country but in several countries. So that brings us into the during segment or like the middle, the no man's land type of energy. And we have June, or she's still June at this point, and she's in the center, and she is learning about this new role that she is going to inhabit. And this is when the structure, the social structure specifically in regards to women, starts to appear. So there is a hierarchy. We have the wives, we have aunts, we have Marthas, handmaidens, and unwomen. So these are the 5 categories of women, and they are categories based off of fertility, age, and status that women are placed into, that have differentiating abilities and power to a certain extent, however, are still recluse to their specific role. So you have wives. Wives are the wives of commanders, of the leaders of this new country called Gilead. We have aunts, and aunts are the ones who are supposed to curate and mold these women who are fertile into becoming handmaids. We have Marthas, who are kind of essentially like housekeepers to a certain extent, and they work for the house of wives or commanders. And we have the handmaids, which are the people who, handmaids are going to bear children for this new country. The last segment is the unwomen. Very much ageism, but a lot of older women are kind of pushed into the unwomen category. Unwomen basically spend their time cleaning up, but what they're cleaning up is toxic waste, radioactive material, dead bodies, and so it is basically a determined uncertain death. The book kind of states that, oh, we give them 3 years before the skin of their nose starts peeling away from their body, things of that nature. So it's very much giving, they take these women and they basically just drop them into like Chernobyl and just say, yeah, clean it up, and they just die and waste away there. Yeah, so that is an unwoman, is what they are classified in this society. So as June is entering into this new facility where she is about to learn how to be a handmaiden, she is introduced to a few women. There is Alma, Janine, Dolores, and Moira. So she meets like her best friend. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even mention that. In the first, did I mention that? I don't know. Before June, we have Moira. Moira and June are best friends. They kind of get separated with all the cacophony of people trying to escape and this new country being formed. And June is then goes to the center and she sees her best friend, Moira there. And we are learning about all these characters, specifically also Janine as well, and who these people are and how they are taken from their reality in life before, and how their own circumstances and honestly their own trauma is used against them to curate this perfect identity that the aunts want them to have. Moving on to the after, we have Offred. Offred is also June, but her name is June, but they call her Offred because the house in which she is working at is a house by Fred and Serena Waterford. So all of the handmaids, depending on what house they go to, they kind of take off, like OF, and then they adopt the first name of the commander. And their job and their responsibility is to provide this family with a child. Yeah. This is where things kind of get sticky. One, we have Serena Joy, who is the wife of this commander, and she wants a child. She wants a child desperately, and with handmaids, there is this thing called the ceremony. Before I go into the technicalities, and I do want to read you like a little excerpt from the book, but before I go into the technicalities of the ceremony, I feel as though I need to talk to you about the biblical references that are used in order to perpetuate and upkeep this doctrine or this society. One of the books that is mentioned specifically is the book, not the book, girl. It's a book, well, it's Genesis, the book. However, it is a story of Jacob with Leah and Rachel. And Rachel saying, "Give me children or else I die." I feel as though if you don't know any background, I'm going to give you a very, very short, condensed version of the story. And we're going to do this quickly. So in chapter 29 of Genesis, it's kind of where the story kind of begins to a certain extent. And Jacob is working for a family member, and he asks his family member, "If I work for you for 5 years, can I marry your daughter Rachel?" The family member says yes. He works for 5 years and then kind of goes to collect his property. It's kind of the vibe, and he somehow, some way gets tricked into marrying Leah. That he wakes up the next day upset, and he goes to his family member and it's like, "Hey, I didn't want to marry Leah. I wanted to marry Rachel." And the rationale that the family member gives is, "I can't marry off my second daughter before I marry off my first." So lo and behold, Jacob gets married to Leah and Rachel. However, subsequently after they are both married, Leah is the only one who is bearing him children, and she's bearing a lot of sons. She's having a lot of kids. Rachel is upset and she says, "Give me children or else I die." And she decides to take an illegitimate means of her servant Bila and says, "Hey, Jacob, have a child with her so that I may basically take the child." Stuff happens. Leah gets upset. She gives her servant messiness, a lot of messiness. Lo and behold, Rachel, then she does conceive a son, Joseph. And that's kind of how the story goes. But they're taking the segment, specifically "Give me children or else I die," as a way to pacify their desires to take these women and force them to have children. Yeah, so that is kind of the biblical reference that the ceremony honestly starts off with. It is a lot of pomp and circumstance of them all sitting and the commander reading, because, oh yeah, men can only read, women are not allowed to read in this society. The commander reading a Bible of the story before the ceremony, or basically sex between the handmaid and the commander occurs. So the TV show kind of addresses it a little bit differently, but I kind of want to read a little excerpt of the ceremony. "Above me, towards my head of the bed, is Serena Joy is arranged, outspread. Her legs are apart. I lie between them, my head on her stomach, her pelvic bone under the base of my skull, her thighs on either side of me. She's too fully clothed. My arms are raised. She holds my hands, each of mine and each of hers. This is supposed to signify that we are one flesh, one being. What it really means is she has control of the process and thus the product, if any. The ring of her left hand cuts into my fingers. It may or may not be revenge. My red skirt is hitched up to my waist, though no higher. Below her, the commander is F word. What is he? F word is the lower part of my body. Not just saying make love, because that's not exactly what he's doing. Capitulating two would be inaccurate because it would imply two people and only one is involved. Nor does rape cover it. Nothing is going here that I haven't signed up for. There wasn't a lot of choice, but there was some, and this is what I chose. Therefore I lie still, a picture of the unseen canopy over my head. I remember Queen Victoria's advice to her daughter. Close your eyes and think of England. But this is not England. I wish you would hurry up. So over the course of several weeks, one in the book, handmaids have 3 chances to get pregnant from each house in terms of the houses. So they go to their first posting, second posting, third posting, and they haven't had a baby by like their 3rd posting, then it's like you might become an unwoman type of issue. And Serena is very much kind of coaxing June or Alfred to find other accommodations to have a child. Luckily, June does find some allegiance and to have a child and possibly leave Gilead, and that's kind of where the book leaves us. So, very quickly, a few feelings that I have about this book is that this book feels so silently loud. And like the best way that I can explain it is if you think of like an empty room, like an empty like classroom, and there's people in there, but like nobody's talking, nobody's saying anything, everybody is still, and then somebody randomly drops a pencil. You know, it's the factor that even though they dropped the pencil, because of the comparison of the sounds, that pencil dropping sounds so loud, even though it's just a pencil dropping. And that's kind of how the book felt in terms of the tension that was in the Waterford household, how people moved about. It was this very like tense, very stressful situation, and you could feel that within the pages of the book. And then 2, the story that was what's compelling for me is that the story is not simplistically about, okay, men have a whole bunch of power and women don't. Because if you look at it, like based off of what I said, there's nothing in there that would say like, oh yeah, women have power and or influence. But there is. It's not so clear cut. And even though in terms of structurally, in terms of legally, in terms of laws, yes, men definitely have more power. Is that right? No. Is that okay? Of course not. But it's still the factor that it's not that these women are just out here unable to do anything. For an example, there are exceptions to like almost every rule in Gilead. And one of those primal examples is the aunts, right? So for women specifically, they are not allowed to read. However, the aunts are given the discretion to read. They're given that ability. And it's one of those like small things that honestly I think can make a difference, but it's this thing of like we're not totally powerless. And even Serena Joy, in terms of the power that she has in terms of over her home, is not so obtusely black and white. There's a lot of gray mixing with this society that is supposed to be this very standardized, upright society. And I thought that it was talked about very well in like the nuances of the book, but the book just felt very silent. Well, now let's go into why this book was banned. This book was banned in so many places. Like I'm not even going to like name all these places. I think the first place that it was banned in was Texas, and there was a lot of reasons. Some of the reasons why this book was banned was because of like feminism, religious extremism, sexuality, violence, profanity, Christian. It felt as though a lot of people felt as though it was an attack towards Christian rhetoric, and also having an LGBTQIA character. People continuously are like still trying to like ban or preclude this book. For example, in Madison County, Virginia, Governor Youngkin, he came out with trying to like ban or preclude this book. Margaret Atwood kind of gave this rebuttal of, you're basically trying to ban this book for profanity and the contents of it, and her rebuttal was just like, this book is not as sexually explicit as the Bible. And so there's just these places that are trying to remove it, specifically because they feel as though it's like an anti-Christian ideas that are in this book. And then it just kind of like also leads way to the questioning of, when we're banning books, we are also precluding people who are not able to afford books the access to have them. And that whole conversation on when is it okay to ban a book and when it's not. And I think everybody has like their own opinion regarding it, but that is that. The last part that I kind of want to talk about in regards to this banned book is the political relatability to it. This book has so much political relatability to it, and it was intentional. In an article that I'll put on the screen, and all of my sources for all of the information I received will be down below as well. But an article entitled, what is it entitled? Abortion Bans and Handmaid Protest, the Connectedness of the Handmaid's Tale to the Disruption of Reproductive Rights. One of the quotes that were from Atwood in this article was her stating that, I made a rule for myself that I would not include anything that human beings hadn't already done in some other place or time for which the technology did already exist. So in these books that she is writing, and specifically The Handmaid's Tale, they are based off of real life events, whether it is communism that is happening in Romania, or if it's women's rights that are being attacked or conflicted in the 1980s. These are all things that she has woven into this book. The article that I just mentioned really kind of yields a light on two different presidential administrations, and that was the Ronald Reagan administration as well as Trump's, and how those two administrations have definitely played a part in banning or restricting, whether it is women's or minorities' rights, or promoting anti-abortion agendas, and that whole rhetoric, and how those things that are happening in real life also are shown up in this dystopian novel. As well as too, in 2022, this book kind of had not necessarily a reinsurgence, but more people were talking about this book specifically, really correlated to the Roe versus Wade being overturned, and all of those things of how there's kind of these symbolisms and this dystopian society that we can see actually in today. One of the things that the article definitely mentioned and made note of is the factor that this book has led way to the TV show that was created, The Handmaid's Tale. It's on Hulu, and this has also promoted the addressing of political and social concerns for things that are happening here today that are relevant for today's time. And I think what is interesting about this book that has been banned and challenged, and to a large view highly controversial, is the factor that this rhetoric, or how people feel, is not specific to America. It has been, I think the Persian edition, the Persian translation of this book has been amended to omit certain parts, as well as in Spain and Portugal, allegedly. This book has been removed from public access, and that has also taken a place and been a part of this larger conversation. And then we also have, when there have been protests, specifically when we're talking about women's rights, and we have people who are dressing up in costumes as handmaids, and how this one book has led way to a lot of discourse, whether good, bad, or indifferent. This book has been super controversial. There have been so many states and countries, school districts that have banned this book, and I think that that is really telling. It's very telling, and you kind of get to make your own consensus on what that is. But yeah, there's this quote on the back of the book by the Houston Chronicle, and it says, "An excellent novel, read it while it's still allowed." And that is all that I have to say about The Handmaid's Tale. If there's another banned book that you guys want me to read or review or let you know about, please let me know down below. But yeah, that is all for today. Also, let me know your thoughts. Like, do you feel as though this book, there's a little bit of a snippet of this book and everything that I've told you about this book. There's so much more, of course. Didn't want to tell you everything, but what do you think? Like, do you think that this is a book that should be banned? Do you think this is a book that just feels like it's challenging certain people's ideological views so that they're pushing back? What do you think? Because even the country of Canada, the book has been challenged in Canada, and Margaret Atwood is from Canada. So if I missed anything, if there's anything else that you would like to add, please let me know as well. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. And guess what? I'll see you next time.